what Jeff's thinking with white balls. That's something different. But that could also explain the flashes of light. Those could all be this
Even the white
source.
balls could just be something that's completely different, but then suddenly get attracted to that area where there's that electromagnetism beginning, because let's say that that we usually see them about a day or two before the crop circle appears. Well, maybe that energy is beginning to build and it attracts these balls of light, whatever
so
those might be.
There's consistent magnetized electrons in the soil, which you talked about, which could be a result, an after effect of this event.
Yeah.
So this event happens, right? I'm willing to accept that this event happens because of some instability underneath the ground versus the electromagnetic field. I'm not a scientist, so I'm explaining that very poorly.
Yeah.
Coupled with the fact that it became popular, so you had guys like Doug and Dave who were sitting there going, hey, man, let's go create these ourselves.
Yeah.
Then Doug and Dave, have copycats. Because Doug and Dave don't strike me as particularly intelligent folk.
Yeah.
They probably were also consuming a few pints when they came up with this idea. So what's to say that Fred and myself can't go and create some hoaxes ourselves, right? I mean, we're going to measure twice and cut once, okay? So I think that there is the possibility that these are real, that they're not man-made, but I also am willing to accept that there's a substantial portion of these that are man-made.
Even the cereologists admit that they believe the majority are hoaxes, man-made.
That's fine, but cereologists...
I'm saying that even the people that are diehard, that study, like they dedicated their life, like this is what they believe in and do, and are kind of, I don't want to say blinded, but like this is what they deal with, and they're trying to prove something's going on. Even they would say that the majority are man-made. But the question, like, it comes down to what about the ones that aren't?
Unfortunately, the issue that I have with that still is that a cereologist is just...
You just don't like the cereologists.
I don't mind cereal. I'm sure they're great people. What I don't like is that Joe Smith can come off a bus one day and go, well, I'm a cereologist
Well, Jeff,
now.
you're the one that introduced that. Before we bash that too much, you're the one that introduced that, because you said today, hey, did you know they call themselves cereal? Did you say that they call themselves, or people call them? Like, how did...
You can Google cereologist, and there is...
Do you remember looking into that prior to tonight? Because I actually had not heard that come
There's
up
actually
once.
a Merriam-Webster's definition for cereologist.
Okay.
And a cereologist is somebody who does study crop circles,
okay.
but also does not believe that crop circles are man-made.
Okay.
So it doesn't take anything to become a cereologist, but they tack that title ologist on, so it tries to give them some authority.
Since you came off,
you're a podcastologist, right? So that's supposed to give you authority in all things podcast. What I'm saying is bullshit. Is not that these people don't have a passion for something, and not that these people don't go out and study something. What I'm saying is bullshit is that there's zero education and zero science behind that particular ology.
I understand. Yeah.
Okay. There's no study behind that ology. Now, if a physicist goes out and he wants to study that, if an Earth space scientist goes out and they want to study the particles and see how they match up with things from space, those are legitimate sciences. A cereologist is no different than you and me going out and looking at that crop circle.
And the big things, someone might say, well, why do they need a piece of paper? The simplest way to respond to that would be like, the unfortunate thing is, like, without having an institution and having that piece of paper, without having an organized study, what you don't have is, not that you don't have critical thinking, but you don't have what's called peer review. You don't have peer review.
And I don't care about paper. I mean, you know me well enough to know that the paper degree that I have hanging on my wall is irrelevant to what I actually do.
But that peer review process is what would actually legitimize this more.
It's the fact that there is no study.
Yeah.
There is no professional study.
But I have an important question for you.
Okay.
And then I want to get to Jeff. I like you came off the fence and you said what you think that this probably is. And that's the fascinating thing here, though, with crop circles, and that's why we went through so many different things. I made a point to talk about the science, to talk about the art, to talk about the geometry, to talk about the every aspect, how long it's made, the conditions, things like that, because all these little nuggets impact. It's so hard to actually definitively say what you think it is. So I 100% agree with what you're saying, but let me throw this at you. Then why, if it's a magnetic thing going on, why specifically is it these perfectly intricate geometric designs?
Great question.
Do you know what I'm saying?
But we've talked about that. We've talked about that ad nauseum, right? I don't know, and again, took geometry twice and didn't do that great the second time around either. I don't necessarily know perfect symmetrical things or perfect geometric things, nor do I think anybody in this room does. But I was told that a butterfly's wings are perfectly symmetrical. That if you folded a butterfly's wings on top of each other, they were actually perfectly symmetrical. I have seen a beehive, And I do see what looks to me by naked eye to be a perfectly symmetrical hexagon, pentagon,
Right.
I don't know what ogon it is. So why can't those two things, and a snowflake, right, which looks perfectly symmetrical also under a microscope,
Yeah.
why can't those things, which are nature-made, if you don't believe in God or God-made, those things are not man-made, why can those things be perfectly symmetrical, but an electromagnetic phenomenon like a crop circle not be perfectly symmetrical?
Well, it goes beyond more than just perfectly symmetrical. I mean, some of these are intricate designs.
Well,
it has nothing to do with just symmetry.
Well, and
but
I believe fully that there is some that you could conceivably. I think that mathematics, as much as I don't like mathematics, I think that mathematics does tell a lot more than just 1 + 1 = 2.
I understand. You're saying that it can happen, but I guess my question is why? And because that's part of.
I think then we're getting down to a philosophical question.
Okay.
Of math being the original language of everything, of math being the one thing that is constant.
But I guess what you're okay
and
with,
the whole Earth itself can be mathematically explained. So why can't you have a crop circle or an electromagnetic phenomenon be mathematically explained?
All right, and that's kind of where I'm going to go with it. And I kind of am seeing what your idea of why that might be, because I'm going to. But Jeff. So we're going to make you get off the fence now.
Okay.
You've got, basically, you got to pick a direction. What is the most likely, and even if you're like, well, I think it could be this, I think if you want to support more than one thing, but ultimately you have to pick one and be like, if we're backing you in a corner saying pick one direction that you're going to go with and say that I would, if I had to bet money that this is my best guess of what's going on here. What do you think's going on?
Well, I think that because they've become more intricate since they first were introduced, that I'm leaning toward it's a hoax.
Oh, okay.
Completely a hoax.
Yeah. Nice.
So would all the science then be bogus? Like when they walk in and cameras die, or like the differences in the soil, just coincidences and
yeah. No, I don't know.
Stumped you.
Because they've become so complex now, you know. I mean, why?
So the fact that they've become complex as opposed to being...
What changed in the world to make them become more complex? Did nature change? It's... you know.
Let's see. And that goes back... and that kind of actually is going to unravel what my theory is going to be, but that goes back to the beginning. Like you said, why did they become more complex?
We don't know that they necessarily became... I mean, we do know they became more complex, but that doesn't mean that they didn't become less symmetrical. Aurora Borealis, I don't know how to say it plural, and Aurora Borealis, for example, has also increased in magnitude. And has increasing and decreasing magnitude over time. A star, the brightness of a star, has increasing and decreasing magnitude based upon what season it's in.
Right.
So why can't something have a more defined or less defined pattern?
Maybe we're entering a more complex age of Aquarius. So the math, maybe the magnetic fields of the Earth is changing, which they have been. Well, maybe that is the reason that the complexities.
I mean, the magnetic field of Earth does change, and you have things that actually regularly impact our electromagnetic field that hit our electromagnetic field. So maybe impact.
Do you still think it's a hoax after that?
I don't disagree that some of these are hoaxes.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, especially the one you were talking about with the Carl Sagan, and how then it comes back and it's like, oh, look at this, and it's like a message back to us.
Now that one, I'm going to agree with Jeff on that one. I think that what these have evolved into is intense. Like, how does Carl Sagan know? It's Carl Sagan, right? Well, I keep wanting to say Peter Sagan, the cyclist. But how does Carl Sagan know which planet to send that message to? Like, how are things? Like, how do we beam something into space? How do we beam a message into space?
Well, I'm sure they had I think
a Canon
radio telescope. Radio wave.
They actually said, I get it. I just don't know.
Well, they said radio wave would be the most universally. I actually remember watching a thing on it, and it had nothing to do with crop circles, but in terms of like communicating with outer space, that radio wave is. That's why we have all these big radio telescopes all over the planet, because scientists have kind of pretty much agreed that that most likely, if there's other life out there communicating back to us, that a form of radio would be the likely means.
But wouldn't that be absorbed by space, though? Isn't space...
Right, and also if they're going to communicate back, they're going to do it in a crop field.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Look, I don't know enough about this to say radio waves aren't the way to go.
Right.
There's obviously a reason. You're right.
Well,
There's
let's say
obviously
this.
a reason. We're
Yeah.
obviously sending signals up there, but really, whoa,
It doesn't matter now.
really, were they both? They were received by two different planets, perfectly interpreted.
Yeah.
And then it was like fill in your blanks.
Yes.
Like
Right.
a big intergalactic Mad Libs going
Well,
on here.
And why?
So
why
let me
into a
ask you
crop
this,
circle?
and then I'll get off the fence, Jeff. If you're going to go with hoax,
Uh-huh.
can I at least have you define hoax? Now, do you mean hoax as in just these are all just man-made for the purpose of just confusing people and making this into just carrying on a never-ending fun, weird thing, or it's man-made but there's a reason for it, or do you think it's man-made with no reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's man-made by a group. Maybe they're all related.
Yeah.
Maybe not. And just the more it's sort of like the more complicated they can make it and pull it off. It's like a great achievement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking about before. Maybe it's like some underground society.
Well, there is that theory that
You know.
the Mayans have something to do with crop circles.
Yeah,
We didn't even
see?
get into that because
So there you go.
I watched it and I stopped caring.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, it's really interesting, and I love the conspiracy part of it, if conspiracy is the right word.
Uh-huh.
I love the theory behind it, but I can't get behind it. I still think I'm right.
Can you give us a 30-second elevator pitch of the Mayan? Because
Nope.
I don't really know it.
I will not.
Okay.
Except that the Mayan civilization still exists.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of theories about the Mayan civilization. The Mayan civilization has been sending us messages just through artifacts, not through that. And so
Right.
there's theories that the Mayan civilization still exists underground and that
And they're sending these messages.
they're creating.
Oh, maybe this is the Hollow Earth. This is the people that live the Hollow Earth
There
inhabitants.
are people
Ooh.
that think that Bigfoot are really just the Mayans and they're caught outside of their cave underground.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know how they possibly believe that. There's no evidence the Mayans were gigantic, but we'll go with it.
There's no evidence that they weren't. Actually, even though that there is.
There's a little more
like
evidence.
their doorways.
They're made up. Or let me do what everybody else does. Since that doesn't fit what I want to believe,
Yeah.
that's just what they want you to believe.
Yeah,
Fred. They just want you to believe they weren't Bigfoot.
So, I guess anything else you guys want to add? I'll get off the fence and wrap it up. Is there anything that you guys want to add before I do that? All right, so I'll have my say, and then you guys can tear me apart.
Oh, we will.
Yeah. So it would be awesome to think that this was aliens communicating.
Yes.
I think that, as you said before, this is what this is not. This is not proof of aliens.
It is not.
Not to be like a dick, but it's not proof that it's not.
I didn't say
It,
that.
yeah. So there is a potential.
It
yeah.
could be,
Yeah.
I guess.
So what I'm going to do is go through a couple theories, starting with the is it aliens? I'll say like 1 out of 10. There's 10% chance that it is aliens communicating, and this is how they've chosen to communicate for some reason.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree. I'll never say something is factual that I don't know for a fact is
Right.
factual. So I don't know that it's not aliens, but I ain't going to go 1 out of 10. I'll go 1 out of 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, you might be.
1 out of 10, 10% is pretty damn
I'm trying to.
high.
I'm trying to think of just whole numbers. But you're
look,
right.
the
you're right.
possibility is there, but I'm more likely to get hit by a helicopter on my way out of here.
I guess when I was saying 1 out of 10, I'm thinking of like the 4 or 5 theories in my head, and I'm weighing those 4. I'm thinking, okay, of the 4 or 5 theories in my head, the aliens is a 10% chance in the context of those possibilities.
that.
But yeah. So looking at the things, if it's not a hoax, which I think the majority are hoaxes, but I'm going to buy into the science that there is some observable science going on at some of these. So I'm going to buy into that. I'm going to buy into the fact that these are happening in certain places where there are basically sources of magnetic energy. I'm going to buy into the fact that they also happen to appear next to ancient monolithic type things like Stonehenge. And it's not just Stonehenge. There's other monolithic places in the area that these occur by, which
is pretty widely accepted that civilizations built Stonehenge around some sort of
and whether it was a magnetic thing or like
Yeah,
the ley lines of the planet Earth, something that they understood that maybe we as an entire civilization, maybe there's scientists understand it, but we as like an overall population don't understand or maybe even just care about because we have our iPhones and That's all we need. So I'm not going to ignore the signs. So if I don't ignore the signs, I have to use that to come to an explanation. Say it's not a hoax. That there's something behind a portion of these. So then I have to ask myself,